Hey, Margie here. Would you like to know what you can do to live both longer and healthier? Well, if so, you are in the right place because today we're focusing on longevity. And our special guest is Chris Burres. And Chris is a published author and the host of the upcoming Uncovering the Secrets to Longevity Health Summit. He is the founder and chief scientist at MyVitalC, where he manufactures a Nobel Prize winning molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experiment result in history. His mission is to help people live longer, healthier, happier, and pain-free lives, one dose at a time. So this interview is full of so many great tips that you can put into your life right away. So stay tuned. Welcome, Chris. I'm so happy to have you here on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Margie, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share information with you and your audience, and thank you for this opportunity. Also, I'm excited. We interviewed together for the longevity summit, and we're going to be talking about that, and your audience is going to know how to get all of that stuff for free. So that's pretty exciting.
Yes, it's so interesting because when I hear the term longevity, I don't just think of, having your 100th birthday. I think of so much more. Before we even get started, what are your thoughts on longevity? Just the term, like how would you define longevity?
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating question, and there were some telling things that came out of the summit. So in the summit, I interviewed 55 experts in longevity. To be honest, when I started with a company called Health Means. I know you've worked with them. And they were like, hey, you need to interview 35 to 40 people. And in my mind, I was like, I'll hit 25 and we'll see what happens. And I thought that was like, I'm not sure I'm going to even hit 25. I ended up interviewing 55. So that's absolutely amazing. And I did ask each and every expert, how long do you intend to live? Like, how long do you want to live? And how long do you think humans can live? And some really interesting things came out of it. A lot of it is kind of like what you just described is, how long do you want to live? And the answer is, well, it depends, right? It depends on how I feel. It depends on, mental cognition, physical capabilities. Like those are really key drivers for people. And one of the telling pieces that came out of that I found really fascinating, there were only two people who actually gave a number that they think how long humans can live. And that was also their goal. And I think that's kind of telling. And it is telling about where we're sitting. We're in a quantum shift about longevity, about, biohacking, but specifically longevity. And it's not just kind of now filtering down to the lay people. It's actually in the medical community that longevity is a real thing, and it's a real thing to be discussing. But we still have a very intimate tie between longevity and living in a debilitated state, right? In some sort of infirmity or whatever. And so when you ask this question, the first thought is, okay, well, they're still together, right? It's not, hey, if I had the same mental capacity that I have today and I had the same physical capacity that I have today, okay, that answer becomes very different than the answer to the question now, where we can't separate those. So for me, longevity is living longer, right? With kind of the undertone, which I think maybe a lot of people need the overtone, like the more powerful tone is like same mental capacity, same physical capacity. But yeah, longevity, and then it's blend in with biohacking, and where these two kind of spaces intertwine is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, that's my point as well. It's not just the age, it's that you're still thriving and you're still enjoying life, and your life still has a lot of value. So to me, that's longevity, thriving as you age. So I have a question for you though. Why did you put this summit together? Like what motivated you to put a longevity summit together?
Well, I recently published this book, Live Longer and Better. And if in that book, I talk like there's lots of stories. Everything that we talk about today is going to be in the book, except for kind of longevity stuff. That'll probably be in another book. In the book, I talk about if 5 years ago you had said that I would be even in the supplement space. So I own a company, MyVitalC. It's right there behind me. And it's a health supplement. And we'll talk about that in a second. And then if you had also said that you'd be a longevity expert, I would have just said that's probably not going to happen, right? Like that wasn't on my radar at all. So let me kind of tell you about how that got on my radar. I'm in 1985, three scientists at Rice University here in Houston, that's where I'm based, discovered this molecule. If you're listening, don't worry. Just imagine a soccer ball where the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. If you have a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms, they discovered that molecule in 1985. They actually won the Nobel Prize in 1996 for that discovery. The molecule's amazing. It makes better inks, better batteries, better tires, better photocells, basically better everything that you would not associate with a supplement, like a health supplement. Because when I say inks, batteries, tires, photocells, you do not think, ooh, I need to consume that. No, you think that's stuff that I need to not consume. And in fact, scientists thought it would be toxic. They put it in a toxicity study. And instead of being toxic, the test subjects that were really given the MyVitalC formula lived 90% longer than the control group. So that turns out to be the single longest longevity experimental result in history. It's peer-reviewed, published research on mammals. And so now this comes out. My business partner and I are manufacturing this molecule. We actually started manufacturing it in 1991 and selling it to research institutions around the world. So I like to call us happy-go-lucky carbon nanomaterial scientists. If there is such a thing, my business partner, Robert, and I are that thing. And so this study comes out and people will start saying, hey, how much should I be consuming? We're a little leery about the supplement industry. We actually kind of postponed for 4 years from the first point that people started sharing with biohackers, these crazy groups of people called biohackers. I call them wacky because now I am one, right? And really, we tried not to get into the industry until 2017. A guy with a big YouTube following started talking about all the benefits he was getting, taking it on a daily basis, and then our phone started ringing off the hook. And so now our customers really kind of forced us into this supplement space. It just, by the way, our most consistent testimonial is that people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. Kind of unusual to have something that you take in the morning. And when I say kind of, it's extremely unusual to take something in the morning that positively impacts sleep. We know things like getting exercise in the morning can help you sleep. Getting exposure to sun can help you sleep, right? Get your circadian rhythm in line with the rising and falling of the sun. Those are things, but there aren't too many things that I'm aware of that you take in the morning and positively impact sleep. So now we get into the supplement market, and we're trying to get, as carbon nanomaterial scientists, we're trying to get our feet under us in this new space, right? And it's a space, again, that we didn't want to be in because we'll just call the supplement industry challenged in general. And so I'm going, okay, well, is a 90% extension of life even that big, right? It's big, but like, where does this sit on existing technology? Like, where does it exist on existing tests? So for instance, the next best way to live longer is calorie restriction. It's abbreviated CR. It's well documented in most animal models that if you reduce calorie consumption by 30%, you can extend your life by 30%. I call that the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet. No one likes to sign up for that diet. I think they need a new marketing spin or something. But so yeah, the next best way to live longer, starve yourself 1/3 to death, and you get a 30% extension. We're talking about taking this molecule, we call it ESS60, dissolved in olive oil, and there's a study, peer-reviewed published research, that shows a 90% extension of life. So that's kind of the first check of like, okay, well, that's if you're looking at the protocols that are out there, we're just knocking it out of the park. And then we've got the supplement on the market. We've got these testimonials coming in. And ultimately, I start doing all the background research to understand where our product fits in this new space, this longevity space. And I just keep accumulating information. And I've just always believed two things about educating people. The first off is you kind of owe it to people because I'm riding on the shoulders of other people. You look at Matthew Walker, Dr. Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. You look at Dr. David Sinclair's Lifespan, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. You've got, Dave Asprey's multiple books. His most recent one is Smarter, Not Harder. You've got Dr. Gundry. He's done such amazing stuff. By the way, I interviewed him yesterday. That was amazing. And Dave Asprey is also in this health summit. And then Ben Greenfield. Like, these are just cutting edge biology guys. And now I'm thrust into this space. And I'm like, well, what should I do with that? Well, I should interview as many people as possible. First reason, because I want to, because I want to actually have conversations with these people and ask them my own questions. Like Dr. Gundry, I told him what I eat every day. And like, do I need to adjust that? Like, how do you get that access to that level? He's a 2-time New York #1, or at least 4-time New York bestseller, New York Times bestseller. So like, I get to ask them questions. So that's the first one. And then the other is, I believe in giving back, and I believe you best know information when you teach it. And so that's really why I put the summit together. So happy to interview you. That was amazing. And that's my answer, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's my philosophy too. It's not as though we know everything, but when you have access to so many great experts, and you really do have great experts on the summit that can share their information, everybody can find something that can enhance their life, and they get what they need. Sort of like a smorgasbord. That's why I find these summits so helpful, because there's just a multitude of people who really have, each one has their own special sauce, and people can connect to those people and figure out their best path forward, which I just love. And I love giving tips and giving things that people who are listening can put into their life right away. So you interviewed so many people. You want to share some of the biggest takeaways and things that everybody listening can put in? I know sleep, what you said about your product helping sleep. We all underestimate sleep, but sleep is essential for your bones, for your happiness, for your overall health. And just improving sleep is monumental, I think,
Yeah.
in terms of extending life and the quality of life. But why don't you share what you found from all the people you interviewed, some of the big takeaways that we can all put into our lives?
Yeah. And sleep is, the thing I like to say about sleep is, everyone knows, right? Like, that sleep is good for your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. Everybody knows this. And it's absolutely important that you get your sleep. Well, unless there's something else to do, right? We're the only creatures on the planet that will forego sleep without a real positive purpose, right? Like, our typical kind of creatures on the planet, the positive purpose is making sure you're staying away from predators, making sure you're getting food, or finding a mate. Maybe finding a mate falls into some of the reasons we stay up late, right? But not all of them. Like, we're the only creatures who will forego sleep. So sleep is incredibly important. And sleep was absolutely mentioned by a large number of the experts. I did ask this question, and I'm so lucky / smart that I did this, because it wasn't done with probably as much forethought as it should have been, because the result is amazing. I asked, give us 2 to 3 shortcuts for longevity or a longer health span that you would share. And sleep was one of the key ones. I think one of the overriding, so it's got to be at least 20, if not 30% of the experts really honed in on not just nutrition, right? Nutrition is good. And Hippocrates, I think, was the first one that says, like, diseases start in the gut and all health starts in the gut. And it's interesting because people will comment and say, like, how did he know this so long ago? Well, it's one of the only inputs, right? Like, the only input that we have into our system that has the opportunity to replace cells or do whatever in our body is the food and the breath. Those are really the two things. Now, exercise, yeah, but that's really kind of external. That's not what we're putting in. So it makes sense that this is so important. The concept of leaky gut and food sensitivities and wheat sensitivities, gluten sensitivity, that just became pervasive for me as I was looking at all of these experts and really what a lot of our conversations, I mean, a number of the 30 to 45 minutes, sometimes hour and 10 minutes conversations were really about that. And so things as simple as like skin tags, like going away because you fixed your nutrition. And fixing that nutrition comes to gut permeability, leaky gut. And so one of the first tips, and I know like you've done a number of summits, and coming off of the summit, you share, hey, like here are you teach some classes, right? Like how do I take care of bone health? And one of your first focuses is testing. And so there's a number of tests out there that you can do to understand your gut and understand what state it is. And a wheat Zoomer test actually looks for antibodies to wheat that are in your blood system. That's a test that came up multiple times. If you've got a severe allergy or reaction to gluten, you can end up with celiac disease, right? Where your stomach is actually not processing, you can't process anything properly. And so people think, oh, well, as long as I'm not allergic to something, then I don't have a problem with that something. But really, there are tests that look at food sensitivities. There's tests that look at, from a genetic perspective of, are you the kind of person who can do carbs? Are you the kind of person who shouldn't overdo protein? So I think one of the takeaways that and frankly, I haven't scheduled anything. I just haven't had time yet. You know how coming off of the recordings of a summit, there's still a lot to do. But I will go get food sensitivity tests. I will go get genetic tests, because I think understanding where you sit today from that perspective is really important. And I know that fits in line with your philosophy.
It's so very interesting that that's what you said, because when I asked people, again, all the different experts I had on root causes and osteoporosis, gluten came up so often. And I have, when, I do that, I have when I see patients and people, that's one of the tests. I'm a big believer in that wheat Zoomer. And I would say probably 90% at least of the people that I work with, it comes back that there is a sensitivity to gluten. And it's also something that, so it's such a big deal. And that inflammation, it actually activates the osteoclasts, which, destroy bone. So it's such a big factor for bone health. And I've seen so many people that once they got off gluten, just like you said, their skin gets better. I mean, besides their bone health gets better and their bone density increases, they also, all these other things they didn't realize went along with gluten. And just one last thing I'm going to say, my husband truly wouldn't be alive today if we hadn't figured out that he had leaky gut from something. And, we had to and then he had what's something called molecular mimicry in gluten. But it's just, if you don't have celiac, it's just not looked at much. Celiac is, but besides that, and most people don't have celiac, it's a small percentage, this wheat sensitivity is just not picked up. So it's such an interesting point that what you're saying for longevity, so many of your experts brought that up. So yeah, so I just totally.
And celiac means that you've actually, like celiac, at least as I understand it, is from ongoing damage, right? It's not like you are extremely sensitive to gluten. Let's say like hone on the key kind of evil character, gluten, and you have it once and now you have celiac. Like it's a degradation of your stomach lining over time because of this extreme sensitivity, right on the realm of actually allergy. So yeah, it's important to get that taken care of, because your sensitivity could be the problem and people don't realize it. Now I thought this was interesting. And I don't remember exactly who said this, and this may be me kind of piecing some things together, which is everybody's biology is different. So we may have a weakness, and our weakness may be our heart, it may be our lung, maybe our kidney. And so when these proteins can get through, and just a kind of brief description of leaky gut, you have a really single cell layer of that's around your stomach lining and through your intestines, right? And when you have a leaky gut, that single layer is actually supposed to, I think it's Dr. Tom O'Brien gave the best example. Like it's supposed to be like a cheesecloth, right? And so when you squeeze stuff through a cheesecloth, only the good stuff goes through the cloth, and the rest of the garbage, really, in this case, ends up being feces, right? Stays inside the cheesecloth. But when you start getting holes, this permeability in the cheesecloth, now some of this stuff that's not supposed to be in the bloodstream starts getting in the bloodstream. And there's proteins, there's lectins, gluten is a lectin. And now these proteins, if you have one piece of your anatomy that's a little bit weaker, then your immune system starts looking at those proteins, equating them to your heart, liver, whatever it may be. And now your immune system starts attacking these. And this is, Dr. Tom O'Brien wrote the book, Autoimmune Fix. And he's presented in this summit also. And I think that's important to know, because you're like, I think one of the reasons, even Dr. Gundry, I just interviewed him, and he was like, yeah, I had a conversation with a medical doctor, probably a cardiologist, because that's the circles he travels in. And he started talking about leaky gut, and she was like, well, that's not a real thing. That's pseudoscience. And he's like, well, but we have actual research, and I've been testing for it, identifying it, and fixing it in my clinic for the last 10 years. Like, it is a thing. And she was like, no, that doesn't mean it's a thing. And he was like, well, this conversation's kind of over. So even the medical community, and I think some of it is because the results from leaky gut can be so varied, right? Like, you can have, brain problems to the point of Alzheimer's, or you can have cardiovascular problems, or you can have kidney or liver problems. And those can all be caused, the root cause. This is kind of the takeaway from the Longevity Summit, is like, the root cause is often, if not always, leaky gut.
Yeah, and you always need to start there. Like, people always ask, well, where do you start? And there's many places,
Yeah.
obviously you can be doing exercise while you're doing, but you can't ignore the gut. It's just, it's so important. It's so foundational. I always look at it with, if there's an issue, you can be eating the greatest food, but you may not be absorbing it. So that's such an interesting point. And that really also holds true for people with their bone health, because it all goes together. All the principles of longevity and really thriving as you get older, the bones aren't in isolation. So yeah, those are great. And Tom O'Brien, he does say that, which I think is an important point. People can have the same issue in their gut, and one person will have brain fog, another person will lose bone, another person will have bone loss, another person will be coughing nonstop. That was my husband's symptom, like unbelievable issues, because that's his weakest area. So it's always your weakest link is where it tends to be. So yeah, that's great. So everybody, really important to hone in on the gut, and not, because I think a lot of people just live with it. I go once every 3 days to have a bowel movement, and I have some indigestion, and they just think that's normal as you age. But I know, I'm sure as your expert said, no, we can do things, and we can really enhance really every aspect of your life. Is that what people said?
Yeah. And I'm going to add, right? So you've got this gut permeability issue, but you also have the microbiome diversity, right? Dr. Gundry was describing, right? Because he was a physician, a cardiothoracic heart surgeon for so long. And when they came out with broad spectrum antibiotics, this was amazing for them. So, right, they no longer had to take the time to figure out what was causing the problem and then prescribe the specific antibiotic that was good for that particular bacterial challenge, right? They now would actually just go like, well, just give them this, and then it just kills everything. And it literally did, right? It's killing everything in the gut. So now this unbelievably complex microbiome, which actually, when they came out with broad spectrum antibiotics, they didn't even know how diverse it is. There were so many bacteria that they hadn't identified yet, because as soon as they get exposure to oxygen, they die. So you can't cultivate them in a petri dish exposed to oxygen, right? So we knew they're there, but we don't know what they are. And then we actually get, as soon as we were able to identify DNA and start analyzing the DNA, we could see, well, there's dead things here, right? These dead microbes, in this case, bacteria, anaerobic bacteria, they're there. So now we can start figuring out how to cultivate them. And there's a product I introduced, Colleen Cutcliffe, with the company's Pendulum, and they actually sell Akkermansia, which is a keystone. So one of the key pivotal bacteria in your gut, and they didn't even know it existed like 7 to 10 years ago because of this. So that diversity supports that as well. And I think those would be like the 1-2 things that you want to be focused on to improve your health overall and improve your health span.
Hey, Margie here. If you're looking for a way to stay motivated and get results in your bone building plan, then I have the perfect solution. the Happy Bones Club. This is my exclusive members community where you get direct access to me on our live monthly Q&A sessions, along with in-depth classes, guided workouts, and interviews with guest experts. So you can continue to learn about all aspects of your bone health and tailor your journey to strength and vitality with the support of a community working towards the same goals as you are. So just go to tinyurl.com/happybonesclub to learn more, or you can click the link in the show notes. I hope you'll join me and be part of this great community. Now back to the show. That's so interesting. You want to just go in detail, because a lot of people haven't heard about acromantia, and I think it's really interesting because it really could be upset. The balance of your gut, it's a key component.
Yeah. So acromantia, again, they didn't know it existed because it's an anaerobic bacteria. So as soon as it's exposed to oxygen, it dies, right? So typically what we do with bacteria is we take it out, we put it in a petri dish, we cultivate it, it grows, and we can study it and figure out all the postbiotics that it makes, right? So we have prebiotic, we have probiotic, and then we have postbiotics. Prebiotics are the stuff that your bacteria in your gut eat. The probiotics are the bacteria in your gut, right? So you take an acromantia, that's a probiotic. And then postbiotics are the things that those bacteria make that our body uses. And there's all sorts of important components. Acromantia, actually part of the word is mucus, is responsible for maintaining the mucus lining in our gut. And so it will consume the old mucus and then relay down the new mucus. So it's kind of like, imagine you've got the Brooklyn Bridge, right? And you got to paint it every 7 years. And so you're just constantly painting it, but only one team of people can paint it. They're called the acromantia group. And so now they're painting it, and then they're stripping the old paint, because you can't just throw paint on the old paint. That's their role. And you can imagine we're talking about gut permeability and its impact for kind of all of the autoimmune diseases. Now, like, think about, we've got a mucus lining. That mucus lining needs to be up to date all the time. So if you take a broad spectrum antibiotic and kill all your acromantia, it's also the thing that will cause C. diff. I don't think C. diff, the incidences of C. diff, which is actually a gut bacteria that we have resident all the time, but when it gets out of control, people will actually die from an overpopulation of C. diff. That's the abbreviation of that particular bacteria. That was significantly less prominent before these broad spectrum antibiotics, because when you take out all the other bacteria that are kind of in balance with C. diff, now C. diff can run amok, and that's when you had all these challenges. So it really is important to have the bacteria in your stomach really well balanced, and not have this gut permeability.
Yeah, and the good thing is that you can identify what's going on and be very specific with the stool tests that exist today. And then not all probiotics contain acromantia. So it's very, I think it's important.
Most won't.
Yeah.
The reason is because it is one of those anaerobic bacteria. And so it has to be manufactured a very specific way. And I think it's manufactured and then freeze dried in such a way with the right coating so that it can get to your stomach, and then it's never been exposed to air. So it's still alive, and then it goes into your stomach and can thrive.
Yeah. So that's one of the benefits of, if you do a stool test and then you choose a probiotic that contains acromantia. So I can't wait to hear her talk. That sounds fantastic. Wow.
And she was amazing. She was a lot of fun. That was a fun talk, and really just a lot of science. And so I would highly recommend people tuning in for that talk.
Okay, great. So we have sleep, we have the gut, we have the gluten, we have the wheat, a lot of things you've told us. But what did you find also were the biggest limiting factors that came out?
Yeah.
I mean, some of those are limiting factors as well, but were there other things that were really causing people not to thrive and to really reduce their longevity as we're defining it?
Yeah. Well, I think even what we've talked to so far isn't a limitation. Let's just say we kind of naturally lose acromantia in our gut over time. We can supplement with that, right? There's ways to do that. And maybe right now we think of it as simply as supplementing with Akkermansia, but maybe it's a gut diversity balance thing that actually the complex system starts wearing down, and I think we can figure out how to fix that, right? If nothing else, we're just supplementing with the Akkermansia. There's also urolithin A is a postbiotic that you can take urolithin A and have a positive impact. And so basically, again, postbiotic is any bacteria in your gut makes some chemical compounds. Those chemical compounds are used by our system. Urolithin A is one of them. And that company's Timeline, and it was Dr. Singh. That was also a fascinating conversation. So I think none of that is a limiting factor, right? We may need to figure out how to pull levers better, but it's not a limiting factor. What I think is the limiting factor, I had stem cells were mentioned multiple times, and I had two particular experts that we spoke about stem cells with. And one of the things, so one, you can take placental stem cells and you can inject those, and those have some positive benefits. In fact, Tony Robbins talks about, he's got a book called Life Force that he wrote with a guy named Peter Diamandis. And he talks about having a shoulder rotator cuff injury, going down to Panama. Exciting. My wife is from Panama, so like go visit it. It's amazing. And maybe get a stem cell treatment. And talks about doing a stem cell treatment and coming out and having a rotator cuff that was fixed, that had been a problem for a really long time. So stem cells have a lot of power. In fact, it turns out stem cells are the repair mechanism of our entire body. So a stem cell is just a cell in your body that hasn't figured out what it's supposed to be. It hasn't gone to college or hasn't gone to whatever, it hasn't figured out its career, right? And then they float around in your body, and when it finds a place, like we understand, and I should probably have some stats on this, would be kind of interesting, that all the cells in your heart get replaced over a certain period of time. We know that skin's flaking off all the time, so skin cells are being replenished. Well, where does that replenish come from, right? It actually comes from stem cells. And this was, again, maybe 15 years ago, people didn't think that was true. Now we know that to be true. So you can get stem cells injected, or Stem Regen, that's the name of the company, and the guy is Christian Drapeau, which is a French name that I'm close but not accurate on. I'm just close. And he has kind of scoured the earth looking for those components. Like if you go into any area, there'll be, if we go kind of more primitive, and there'll be some, shaman who is like, hey, what do you give to people, like in general, that like helps everything? And the concept actually started with an algae. Christian was working with a company that manufactured an algae, and it was an algae supplement. And they were seeing these benefits, and he's trying to figure out what the benefits were. And they figured out that it was actually increasing the amount of stem cells that your own body released into the blood system. And it turns out if a stem cell floats around and can't find anything to do, it just gets reabsorbed back in the red marrow. So it's not a detrimental thing to have more stem cells out in your system. And then he went kind of around the world and found, it's this root, it's this leaf, it's this, and put all of these into one product that releases more stem cells. So those are the two things. That's positive. The limiting factor is your red bone marrow, and you'll know this from bones, right? Shrinks over time, right? And that's where your stem cells come from. So I actually had a follow-up question. I sent an email to Christian, and I was like, so is that the limiting factor? Because if we don't have the cells to repair our system, which is constantly repairing, then that's a limiting factor. And he kind of confirmed that's his thought. If your red marrow keeps shrinking as you age, and we don't know of any way to prevent it from shrinking, maybe you end up in a situation like, dialysis for kidneys, where you go in and you just got to regularly get stem cells injected, or maybe eventually we can figure out how to take a pill of stem cells. But that seems to be a legitimate, hard limitation.
Oh, interesting. And the people who are doing the stem cells, they're doing it outside of this country, outside of the United States?
No, there's some stem cells. So there are certain types of stem cells that you would need to do outside of the country. and there's some that you can do inside the country. So yeah, my conversation was with Dr. Joy Kong. She's in California, and then Christian, I think, is in Canada. And again, he's not doing anything. He's just the right collection of natural products that are known to release stem cells.
Oh, this is great. I can't wait to listen.
Yeah,
It's
it's
also very,
good stuff.
it sounds like very cutting edge, which is,
I'm going to tell you, so you've done these enough, and I think the initial goal going into these conversations was like 30 minutes, right? Almost every one of mine went to an hour, right? Like just almost every one, because I just had so many questions and it was so fascinating, and like, how do we dig into this? And so there's a lot of great information here.
oh, wow, that just sounds incredible. So it's so interesting. And the thing is, again, if you find what I love about these summits, because sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, there's so many speakers. You don't have to, if you get one thing that's going to improve your life, that's great, because overwhelm is sort of our enemy. But
Yeah.
you don't have to look at it that you have to do everything. Like look and see what really interests you. So if it's stem cells, you go to the stem cell classes.
Yep.
If it's bones, you come to my class. If it's whatever it is. So it's interesting though. I'm just wondering, I know in my summit, everybody talked about mindset and stress. Was that
Mm.
something that came up a lot as well?
So, well, certainly mindset and stress, and I think you can throw into mindset not just stress, but also community,
Hmm.
which I don't know. I mean, I think it's easy to separate them, and that's probably the right thing. But I also throw them in very similarly. But that's probably wrong. Like you can have the right mindset and not have a good community.
Yeah.
And you look at the blue zones across the country, those blue zones that are known to have people who tend to live longer, reduced incidences of stroke, reduced incidences of heart attacks. And one of the component, like people are like, oh, it's the diet, or it's that they have to carry a bucket of water up the hill every day. A lot gets missed, and I think is really valuable in the community, right? In that sense of purpose. So I think it was probably not mentioned enough. That's just my opinion. We are the only species whose death rate increases on Monday, right? So there's no deer or rabbits or squirrels that are dying predominantly on Monday. When we have a purpose, when we have something that we look forward to, we can actually stave off dying. Like that's a real thing. And so having that purpose, having that mindset really can change that longevity.
I love that. So yeah, so this is going to be really wonderful. I'm looking forward to it because you really do have great people, and I just know there's so much to learn. So I want to go back. I want to go back
Yeah.
to your product a little bit, and just why is it that it extends life? What is it actually doing that are causing all these great results?
Yeah. So that's the first question, right? A 90% extension of life in mammals. Holy smokes, what is causing this? And so the first thing that I'm going to talk about kind of my progression in understanding this and ultimately in the current theory. The first is, hey, great. Our most consistent testimonial is focus and energy during the day and better sleep that night. We know that sleep is good for your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And then the next question is, okay, well, why does it help sleep? And we might have an explanation for that. The other is, if you look at the medical community thinks about aging in two ways, right? That it's an oxidation issue and it's an inflammation issue, right? So you were talking earlier about systemic inflammation. There's actually a word called inflammaging. I haven't checked if it's in the dictionary. If it's not yet, it will be tomorrow. That's how fast things are changing these days, right? But inflammaging is really, it talks about how this works. So our product ticks both of those boxes. So first, it's an antioxidant. There's a peer-reviewed published research that shows it to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. It's also an anti-inflammatory. We have to be careful here because the FDA will allow us to say that it addresses inflammation related to exercise-induced inflammation. Right, so we've all had a tough workout or maybe just walked longer than normal and felt that inflammation the next morning. Our product can, in fact, help manage that inflammation. We're not allowed to talk about any other type of inflammation because that type of inflammation is directly associated with all these diseases of aging, actually all these autoimmune diseases, the ones, this is going to be your arthritis, your Alzheimer's, your cardiovascular disease, all of these diseases of aging. And really kind of to say that we do anything there, we've just got to do more research. And given our conversation today and learnings in the longevity, one, our product is typically an olive oil, great for your gut and your gut biome. So it's probably helping your gut, helping heal some gut permeability. We can't make any claims, but that would be a reasonable theory. And so those are kind of the things that we lean into.
I want to show my favorite. I think all your products are really good. However, this you sent me, and it's quite amazing, the two separately. And you can explain why you use them, why they're separate. You put 2 drops and then you put one of these. And it's unbelievable how soft, it's for the skin, how soft. There's something incredible about it. Can you just explain why it has to be separated?
Yeah.
And then what magic happens all of a sudden you put it together and you've never felt so much moisture. It's just incredible. I use it in conjunction with all my other skincare, but it's fantastic. Can you just explain what happens there when you mix it together?
Yeah. So first off, I like to share, we talked about how I was not interested in getting into the supplement space. And then one of our business partners was like, hey, you need to do a face serum. And you can imagine how excited I was to do a face serum. The only lotions I would ever use would be sunscreens at some point. But she convinced me and we put a product out. And you probably got a little sample when I sent it to you, but this is the kind of the full size package. And this is a face serum. It's really more of a night serum. And then about the time that was coming out and getting rave reviews, my director of research came to me and said, hey, I found this molecule that's got 30 years of research of skin and hair improvements, and I think you should look at it. So I started looking at the data, and I'm kind of blown away by the improvements that it has. And so that's what the blue lotion is. It's UTH29 is a peptide, and then we have the activator, which has the ESS60 molecule in it. Now, the reason they're separate is peptide, this UTH29 peptide is water soluble, and of course, our ESS60 is oil soluble. You can force these together. There's chemical compounds called emulsifiers will actually allow you to blend water soluble and oil soluble things together. But first off, I don't even like the sound of emulsifier. It doesn't sound like something healthy. If you go Google emulsifier, nothing good comes up. And so we decided to keep this as a 2-part separate solution where you do the 2 squirts, or for every squirt of the UTH29 lotion, you add 2 drops of the ESS60 activator. And I'm not some genius. I just am a guy who's throwing some stuff together and just happens to be in the right place at the right time. And yeah, your testimonials are amazing and typical.
It's just funny because we met and you're like, I'll send you some stuff, and as everybody knows me, I would never promote or even have anybody talk about anything that I don't think's great because I don't believe that. I certainly don't want. And so I'm like, all right, we'll test this out. And I was like, wow. It was, and what point in skincare do you recommend using it, in terms of the other things that people use?
Yeah, I tend to use it in the morning. Right. So I put some on today. I usually remember, I also put it, I've got dark spots on the back of my hand, so I'll put it there. And that's my focus is in the morning.
Yeah, no, but it's so, I still put a moisturizer on top of it, but I don't even know if you need to because
you probably don't. That's
so,
that. And one advantage is right. 'Cause some people talk about having oily skin or dry skin. You can actually add a little bit more of the ESS60 activator or a little bit less of the activator to address that dry or oily skin.
Oh, wow. Anyway, I thought I've been really impressed with it. And then I told you what happened. And my whole bottle somehow got knocked over in the sink and you sent, I'm like, oh no, because I've been enjoying it so much. So then you sent me another one. We could talk on and on. You're such a wealth of information, and I can't wait for this summit. So we'll have all the information about the summit, and it's free, which I love. So people can just, tune in, pick what you want to see. And I'm talking about bones, of course. So
Yeah, it was also and happiness, which I love.
yes,
But
yes.
that's a great piece. I did actually make a URL for your audience.
Oh, great.
For so if they're at myvitalc.com/happy bones, right? That's plural. And that'll just take them to a landing page. Whatever, you can find any one of our products. If you're interested in just one, it's the olive oil. You'll probably find that two-part, the UTH29 and the ESS60 activator on that page. We also have a coupon code for $15 off. That's also Happy Bones. And then if you're interested in trying the product, we offer a 25% discount for subscription. Our team is not trained to talk you out of canceling your subscription. Just go ahead and take advantage of that discount.
Okay, that's great. So I'll have all the information in the show notes. Well, good luck. Your summit's after mine. And yeah, so this is when this is, oh, when we put this out, I think my summit will be done. So everybody will be listening to all the things they can do besides their bone health to really stay as healthy and young as they can. Is there any last minute thing? This has been so wonderful before we leave that you want to share with everybody?
One, tune into the health summit, right? Because there's a lot of value. And you're right, you're going to be overwhelmed, but absorb as much as you can and then circle back and hone in on the one piece that really resonated with you. And I would recommend that be, some of the testing if that's something that you can do. And frankly, if you can't do testing, I'm going to recommend this, the AIP, autoimmune protocol. They sometimes call it a diet, but it's really an elimination protocol where you can get to baseline and then you start adding foods in and monitoring yourself, understanding yourself. It's a free way to figure out what you're sensitive to. So,
Yeah.
so if money is an option, is a concern, like that's just a free way to address that.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And I look forward to staying in touch. And I'm excited about the summit.
Thank you so much, Margie. This was awesome.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Chris as much as I did. And now some new tips you can put into your life so that you can live both longer and healthier. I'm very excited about the Longevity Summit that's coming up. He has a fabulous group of speakers, and I truly believe there's something for everyone. I know I'm going to attend. It's free, and the link for that will be in the show notes. I also do love Chris's products, and he's giving us all a 15% discount. So just make sure to go to myvitalc.com/happybones. And if you need the coupon code, it's Happy Bones. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.